Actor who really brought, realness to television, playing a great character, playing a great son on the Cosby Show.
It's fragile, and in the blink of an eye,
You never know.
you never know. So speaking of legacy, what do you hope that your legacy is going to be?
There is part of me that I will be able to leave this earth, knowing and people knowing that I was a good person.
I've spent, so much of the early part of my life listening to, being celebrated on one hand, but paying way too much attention to the naysayers.
Ice Cube just dropped a bomb that Hollywood does not want you to hear. He claims Malcolm Jamal Warner, the star America grew up with, didn't just pass away. He was silenced. Cube says the proof is out there. Wiped phones, missing manuscripts, and people in high places scrambling to erase every trace of the truth. He's calling it one of the biggest cover-ups in entertainment history. And if what he's saying is real, then Malcolm's story isn't over. It's just been buried, and someone's desperate to keep it that way.
Now we finally have an update on the drowning death of Malcolm Jamal Warner. Now, according to ABC7, they stated that Malcolm Jamal Warner had drowned while he was on vacation in Costa Rica. Now, the article goes on to say that Warner had drowned off the coast of Costa Rica on Sunday.
Something you long believed to be true but realized wasn't.
Well, as one of the main opponents of the Illuminati, I always wanted to know what information they had that we did.
These are the first things we saw when we pulled up to the beach. Signs in Spanish and English warning people about potentially hazardous conditions. This sign even giving a roadmap for how to escape a rip current.
Long before Ice Cube spoke out, there were whispers that Malcolm's career didn't just slow down. It was being shut down. A friend from one of his early TV sets once said, Malcolm was too smart for Hollywood. He asked questions you weren't supposed to ask. And according to industry insiders, those questions made the wrong people nervous. By the late 2000s, people close to him noticed strange things. Projects he was promised suddenly vanished. Contracts in progress would disappear without explanation. One former agent claimed it was like someone was pulling the plug behind the scenes. Every time we were about to sign something big, the phone went quiet. Even Ice Cube hinted at it years before. In an old radio interview, he said Malcolm was a real one, not afraid to speak the truth. And that scares people. It didn't sound like much back then, but looking back now, it feels like the first breadcrumb in a trail that leads somewhere much darker. And just when it seemed like Malcolm might be making a comeback, something happened that would make his silence permanent. Those who were closest to Malcolm say he'd been acting different in the weeks leading up to that night. Not paranoid exactly, but careful. A longtime friend recalled, he kept saying he was working on something that was going to blow the lid off. He wouldn't tell me what, but I could tell he believed it was big. Then came the night that everything stopped. Malcolm was supposed to meet with a small group of trusted friends to go over what he called evidence. He never showed. Hours later, word spread that something had happened, and the official story didn't sit right with anyone who knew him. One of his neighbors told a reporter there were cars outside that we'd never seen before. Dark SUVs. They stayed there for hours, and then they were gone. Next morning, Malcolm was gone too. Even Ice Cube, who's seen his share of industry games, said in an interview years later, that night was no accident. People can say what they want, but I know how they operate when they want to make someone disappear. And it wasn't just his friends who felt uneasy. Some in the industry noticed that certain files, emails, and recordings tied to Malcolm started disappearing almost immediately after. It was as if someone wanted to erase him completely. But that was only the beginning, because what came next was even stranger. In the days after Malcolm's death, those who tried to piece things together kept running into the same problem. The evidence was disappearing faster than they could collect it. A tech friend of his swore, I had copies of emails Malcolm sent me, and overnight they were gone. Not deleted, gone, like they never existed. Even more unsettling, an independent journalist who'd been in contact with Malcolm claimed she had recordings of phone calls where he hinted about names in high places that were trying to keep him quiet. She later told a podcast, my hard drive crashed the night I was going to back everything up. The timing was, let's just say, it didn't feel like a coincidence. And Ice Cube's take, when the paper trail and the digital trail vanished together. That's not bad luck, that's cleanup. Meanwhile, insiders whispered that the project Malcolm had been working on wasn't just about entertainment. It touched on industry money, powerful partnerships, and secrets that could ruin reputations overnight. The more people dug, the clearer it became. Someone wanted this buried so deep that even the memory of it would fade. But what they couldn't bury was the people who'd seen too much, and one of them was ready to talk. Weeks later, a former production assistant who had worked with Malcolm reached out to a small independent blogger. They insisted on anonymity, but their story was explosive. Malcolm told me flat out. They said that if something happened to him, it wouldn't be an accident. He said there were people watching him, people he'd never met, but they knew everything about his schedule. The whistleblower claimed they'd seen Malcolm in a heated argument with a man in a tailored suit just days before his death. They weren't yelling, but it was tense. Malcolm walked away looking like he'd just been threatened. They recalled. Even stranger, the whistleblower said that Malcolm had given them a sealed envelope. Inside, there were photos, notes, and a small flash drive. But before they could open it, their apartment was broken into. Nothing stolen except that envelope. Ice Cube later commented on this in a radio interview, saying, "That's straight intimidation tactics. You don't snatch a random envelope unless you know exactly what's in it, or you're scared of what it could prove." By now, it was clear to those closest to Malcolm that his death wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was the silencing of a man who had been on the verge of revealing something powerful. And the most chilling part, that something may have involved names no one dared to say out loud. Not long after the break-in, whispers started circulating in backrooms and private group chats. According to a close friend of Malcolm's, he had been circling some of the industry's biggest figures, not just actors, but executives, financiers, and even media personalities with deep political ties. He told me once, "If I say their names, I won't get another chance to say anything else," the friend recalled. An old colleague from his sitcom days said Malcolm had grown distant in the final months, becoming guarded about who he spoke to. He started checking over his shoulder every time we met. He'd lower his voice, even in private, like someone was always listening. Rumor had it that Malcolm had been compiling a black book of connections between certain Hollywood insiders and questionable overseas dealings. Whether it was real or not, the idea alone was enough to make some people nervous. Ice Cube didn't hold back when asked about it. When folks in power feel like you can pull back the curtain, they only give you two choices: play along or disappear. Malcolm wasn't the type to play along. It was becoming harder to ignore the pattern, missing evidence, silenced voices, and now the threat of naming names. And if Malcolm really had been ready to speak, the question wasn't if someone stopped him, but how far they were willing to go. The last night Malcolm was seen alive has become a patchwork of conflicting stories, each one raising more questions than it answers. Officially, he was alone at a small gathering with a few trusted friends. But one guest, who has never spoken publicly until now, painted a far more unsettling picture. There was this man none of us knew. They said, well-dressed, polite, but wrong. The kind of wrong you can't put into words. That man reportedly pulled Malcolm aside for a private conversation that lasted less than 10 minutes. When Malcolm returned, his face had gone pale. He left the gathering early, telling a friend he had to take care of something urgent. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. Neighbors later claimed they heard what sounded like an argument coming from Malcolm's place that night. Heavy footsteps, a door slamming, and then silence. The next morning, police announced the shocking news. The official explanation was brief and unsatisfying, leaving more holes than answers. Ice Cube, reacting on a podcast, didn't mince words. They can dress it up however they want, but I know what a cover story looks like. This was cleanup, plain and simple. And while the public was told to move on, those close to Malcolm knew there was more, something dangerous enough to follow him right to his front door. The real question was no longer what happened that night, but who made sure it happened. In the weeks after Malcolm's passing, something eerie settled over the people who knew him best. Calls went unanswered, social media accounts went quiet, and those who once spoke freely about their friend suddenly acted like his name was radioactive. One former co-star, when approached by a reporter, simply shook their head and muttered, "I can't. I just can't," before walking away. Behind the scenes, there were murmurs of friendly warnings being handed out, casual coffee shop meetings where a stranger might lean in and suggest it's best to let the past rest. Some friends admitted they received unmarked envelopes with nothing inside but a photo of them taken from across the street. No note, no signature, just a message that didn't need words. Industry insiders claimed that even projects Malcolm had been connected to suddenly lost funding or were quietly shelved. One producer said off the record, it was like someone pressed delete on his legacy, and they were doing it in real time. Ice Cube summed it up bluntly in another interview. That's the playbook. Scare everybody who might talk, erase anything that could keep his name alive, and hope the world forgets. But not everyone was willing to stay quiet. And as the silence grew heavier, a few determined voices began piecing together fragments of what really happened, setting the stage for a confrontation the industry never wanted to see. Just when it seemed Malcolm's story would fade into the shadows, a small but determined group began pushing back. Former friends, old collaborators, even a few industry whistleblowers started dropping breadcrumbs online, cryptic tweets, podcast appearances, and late-night live streams where the right questions slipped past carefully rehearsed answers. One of Malcolm's closest friends went live on Instagram, clearly shaken but refusing to hold back. They wanted us scared. They wanted us to believe it was over. But I'm telling you, he told me names. And those names are still out there walking free. The stream cut off minutes later, sparking speculation about whether it was an accident or something far more intentional. A retired music executive revealed that Malcolm had been preparing a tell-all, not just about his own experiences, but about the deep-seated corruption, exploitation, and personal betrayals running through the industry. If that book had dropped, the executive said, it wouldn't have just been headlines. It would have been careers ending overnight. Ice Cube, when asked if he believed those accounts, didn't hesitate. I believe every word. And I believe that's why they moved on him. You don't silence somebody like that unless you're scared of what they're about to say. And that fear, the fear of the truth spilling into the public, was exactly what kept the fire burning for those who refused to let Malcolm's name disappear. They weren't just telling his story, they were preparing for the moment the truth would hit daylight. Malcolm's story isn't just a cautionary tale about the dangers of speaking out. It's a reminder of how easily truth can be buried when power and influence are at stake. From Ice Cube's unflinching words to the whispered warnings that followed, every piece of this puzzle points to a reality the industry doesn't want the public to see. But the fact that you're still here, watching, means you're not afraid to look deeper. You've heard the voices they tried to silence, you've seen the patterns they hoped we'd miss, and now the question becomes, what will you do with that knowledge? If you believe Malcolm's story deserves to be told, don't let it stop here. Share this video, keep asking questions, and let the people in power know we're not forgetting. And if you want more untold truths from inside the entertainment world, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because the next story we uncover might be even bigger than this one. The silence only wins if we let it.